Welcome back to the Band Guide, where we use GarageBand to create professional sounding music. I'm your band guy, Colin, and I've made a lot of mixing mistakes over the years. Like, a lot. But like any mistakes, I didn't quit. I learned from them. So today I want to share with you my top mixing mistakes and what I've learned from them so that you can avoid them and start making better music today. As I said, I've made a lot of mixing mistakes over the years, and this video is kind of an example of that. This is part 2 in a 2-part series on all my mixing mistakes. So they're in no particular order, but if you find this video helpful, definitely go back and watch that other video. It's going to really help you out as well. But before we get into it, I have something really exciting I want to share with you. Tomorrow, March 11th at 1 p.m., I'm going to be hosting a completely free live training on how to create a professional sounding mix in GarageBand. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to mix an entire song live right in front of you. I'm going to be walking through everything I do and taking your questions along the way. You're going to learn how to get vocals to sit right in the mix, how to make GarageBand drums sound huge and real, and just generally create a big, wide, professional sounding mix. I'll be teaching all of this in GarageBand, but even if you don't use GarageBand, it's going to be really helpful. So definitely check it out. It's tomorrow at 1 p.m. It's completely free, but you have to sign up to attend. There's a link in the description below where you can sign up completely free. It's going to be really awesome. And even if you can't attend at 1 p.m. tomorrow, I will be sending out a limited access replay of it, but only if you sign up. So be sure to sign up. It's going to be a lot of fun. But let's go ahead and get into part 2 of mixing mistakes we all make. Mixing mistake number 1, thinking we need new gear. Whether it's the software you use to make music, your DAW, or a fancy plugin, or a new guitar, if you have something, then it's enough to get started. There will always be more, different, better, but more improvement comes from doing than having. I've been in studios with super nice gear and been handed a final mix that sounded terrible. And I've made mixes on budget gear in home studios that's been played on the radio. It's more about how you use what you have than what you have. That doesn't mean it's not worth upgrading when you notice your limitations, but don't let it hold you back. Another thought on this, it's easier and less scary to buy more gear. It's scarier to make music and put ourselves out there. But do you want to be known as someone who buys and has a lot of nice gear, or do you want to be known as someone who makes great sounding music? I'm guessing it's someone who makes great sounding music. So don't wait, don't hesitate, don't make excuses. Just make great sounding music with what you have. Mixing mistake number 2, comparing our music to a pro mix. Comparison is the thief of joy, and pro mix engineers have something that you very likely don't have. Thousands of hours of intentional mixing experience. Comparison is not going to help us. The secret is referencing professional mixes, which leads me to mistake number 3, not referencing a pro mix. I mentioned this briefly in part 1, so if you haven't seen that, go check it out. But this is something I avoided for a long time. I didn't want to compare myself to a reference mix, but that was completely missing the point. That's not what referencing is at all. Referencing is about setting up guide rails for ourselves. I think this mix sounds great, so what can I learn from that I can try to apply in my mix? It's a learning tool. Learning to use a reference track can teach you how to mix in any genre because you can just listen to your favorite mixes and try to steal from them, borrow from them, use them as inspiration to fuel your mixing. The key is to zone in on specific areas of the reference mix and reference them relative to your mix. So, for example, if you're working on volume balancing and panning positions, pay attention to how loud their kick drum is relative to your kick drum. Get the volume of your songs at similar total volumes and then figure out, okay, their kick drum is a lot louder than my kick drum. Maybe I need to bring my kick drum up more. Or if their guitars are really wide, maybe you need to pan your guitars wider. Or maybe you need to record a second guitar part to pan off to one side so you can pan one guitar far off into the left side and it feels balanced like the pro mix. Or if you're working on EQ, maybe is their EQ on their snare brighter? Their snare drum sounds crisper. Maybe try a little more EQ on your snare drum to make it a little crisper. Anything that can get you closer to the professional reference mix is really, really powerful. Now, if you learn that an element of the reference mix is different than yours, don't be bummed by that. That's not a failure. You can just adjust your mix to be a little bit closer. That's a really powerful tool. But don't start comparing your mix to the pro mix. Even when you get really, really good at mixing, it's always going to sound different because they're two different songs. They have different recordings, different instrumentation, different tone, different performances. So don't compare, reference. Mixing mistake number 4, not keeping perspective. If comparison is the thief of joy, perspective is kind of the giver of joy. Not quite as catchy, but still impactful. When we mix, we lose perspective. Perspective on how far we've come, perspective on what was working in the original mix. So we need to actively keep that perspective. Be able to quickly check back to how far we've come in the mixing process. How much better have we actually made it? One of the absolute best things you can do is keep a bounce of just your static mix. So you work through and just set your volume and pan positions like we talked about in the last part. And then you export that out and you keep that. And as you work through the mixing process, like my 6 steps to a Pro Mix checklist, you can quickly check how far you've come relative to just the static mix. So finish EQing across your entire track, listen to your mix now compared to that static mix. That's encouraging. Never forget how far you've come. And occasionally you'll discover something that was actually working really well in the static mix that has maybe gotten lost as you've evolved. That's okay, just course correct, and now you're improving and you're staying on track. So keep perspective. Mixing mistake number 5, not setting up proper monitoring. Now, we'll get into some specifics and recommendations in just a minute, but first, there are 2 things that you really need to understand about this. The first is you can't mix what you can't hear. So if you're mixing on a small pair of studio monitors, you likely can't hear what's going on in the sub-frequencies, but those frequencies are still existing in your mix, so they still matter. Even if your monitors say they go down to 40 Hertz, which is definitely in the sub-frequency range, it's likely not producing it super well, and there's still frequencies below that. And if you're mixing on laptop speakers or cheap headphones, forget it, you're not going to really be able to hear those frequencies at all. You should check on those sources, but you shouldn't mix on them. The second thing to consider is that your speakers, if you're using speakers, are moving air and making sound in your room. That is going to bounce off the walls, and that will likely build up at certain frequencies, which is either going to make you hear more or less of those specific frequencies than what are actually in your mix. So, for example, I used to have this great 8-inch pair of high-end JBL mixing monitors that sounded great, but they would build up a lot of bass in my room, and so I wouldn't end up putting enough low end in my mixes. There are 2 solutions that you should be considering. First, if you're using speakers, then you should likely have some amount of acoustic treatment. This could be acoustic panels, but don't forget that soft furniture, blankets, pillows are acoustic treatment as well. Second, you should absolutely have a great pair of mixing headphones, mixing specific headphones if at all possible. Like these Biodynamic DT770s, these things are awesome. I tried a lot of headphones over the years and these are still my favorite. They can extend into the low end so you get sub frequencies, but they also go all the way into the upper end so you get nice brightness as well. You can hear everything going on in your mix really, really well. And you don't have to deal with the room. There's no sound bouncing around. You're just hearing it straight into your ears. So there's no frequencies that are getting added or kind of lost in your room. Now, if you're just getting started and you don't have a great pair of mixing headphones, or you have speakers, but you don't have a great pair of mixing headphones, I highly recommend you check these out. I love these guys. I'll link to them in the description below. If you grab them from that link, it will support this channel. So check them out. And I highly recommend that if you only have one, it should be headphones because you can use them anywhere. They extend into sub frequencies. They go all the way up to bright frequencies. You don't have to worry about your room treatment, but it can be really nice to have studio monitors as well. And if you don't have a pair of studio monitors or you have a pair of really, really cheap ones that you're not happy with, then maybe check these guys out. This is the iLoud Micro Monitor by IK Multimedia. You might have seen these. They've had a lot of hype for a long time, and I finally grabbed a pair because I wanted to know if I could recommend them to you, and I can. They're really good. They have really good fidelity. You can hear the high end super well in these. They're great because they're a super small speaker. So I think it's 3 inches, really small speaker, but it produces sound really well. And it has a sub port that lets low end air come out of the bottom. So you don't really get sub frequencies in them. You get decent low end, okay low mid range, and then pretty good upper mid range and bright frequencies. So as long as you understand the limitations of these, they're kind of great. Because they're small, they don't move a lot of sound in the room. They don't move a lot of air in the room, if you will. So they're not bouncing off the walls quite as much, which is definitely a big pro. And they're also ridiculously cheap. So studio monitors typically start at minimum $200 for a single monitor. This sells for $300 for the pair typically, and sometimes you can find sales on them. So a really good monitor to get you started. As long as you understand the limitations, they can sound really great. They can get loud. They can do what you need them to do. So I've enjoyed in this room, which is a smaller room, going back and forth between these and my headphones, and I feel like I know where they both shine, and I can get really good sub information from these. I can hear the low mids better on these, but then I can hear the brighter frequencies in the upper mids that have a lot of definition and is where a lot of the intelligible frequencies of the vocals and the guitars come through. So definitely check these out. I'll link to them in the description below as well. If you grab them from that link, it will support this channel as well. But if you don't have anything yet, start with the DT770s. Or if you already have a good pair of mixing specific headphones and studio monitors, use them. As I said in one, don't worry about new gear. This is just recommendations if you don't already have gear that you feel like you can trust. And if you already have gear, just start referencing pro mixes. That's going to teach you a lot. That's going to help you learn your speakers and what pro mixes sound like on your speakers. Even in my example earlier, my big 8-inch studio monitors, if I would have referenced pro mixes more, I would have understood that I wasn't putting enough low end in my speakers. So don't forget that referencing is huge. But getting good monitors so you can hear it is helpful because we can't mix what we can't hear. So we need to be able to hear the entire frequency spectrum and high fidelity audio. And studio monitors like this, headphones like this, are a big part of that. Was this helpful? Do you find yourself slipping into any of these mistakes? Let me know in the comments below. I still find myself sometimes avoiding pro mixes. And I think that's because I'm going to compare and not reference. But it always helps if I reference and not compare. So let me know in the comments below. And if you're looking to improve your mixes, then come to my free live training tomorrow at 1 p.m. It's going to be awesome. You have to sign up below, but we're going to hang out all afternoon. We're going to mix a song together. I'm going to walk through all my decisions. I'm going to answer your questions. It's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to sign up at the link in the description below. Even if you can't attend for the whole time or you can't make it at all, you'll get a limited time replay if you sign up. So be sure to sign up at the link in the description below. It's going to be a lot of fun. If this video is helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time, I can only